were forced into marriage for land. She said no love, but fate had other plans. Aisha lived in a small village surrounded by endless fields of green, where the earth smelled of fresh soil after the rains. And the mornings began with the crowing of roosters and the laughter of children running along dusty lanes. She had grown up in a family that was neither rich nor poor, but enough to survive, and her parents always worked hard to maintain the small patch of land they owned. To Aisha, the land was more than just soil and crops. It was a symbol of her family's life, their struggles, and their memories. Yet, as much as she loved her home, she had always felt that life in the village was limited. She had dreams, small, ordinary dreams, but dreams nevertheless. Dreams of making choices for herself, of learning more about the world beyond the fields, and perhaps someday finding someone to love freely, without fear or obligation. From a young age, Aisha had been taught the ways of her community. She learned to cook simple meals, to care for younger siblings, and to help in the fields when the family needed an extra hand. She was gentle, yet firm, caring yet determined, and her parents often boasted about her manners and intelligence. Villagers admired her as well. She had a calm presence that drew people in, and she always listened more than she spoke. But Aisha was not naive. She understood the rules of her village. Families valued land, money, and alliances more than a girl's personal choice. The idea that marriage could sometimes be used as a transaction was something she had seen from the sidelines many times. Cousins and neighbors had been married off to secure land, wealth, or social position, and the girls often had little say in the matter. Aisha had vowed that this would not happen to her. Despite her determination, life had a way of introducing challenges that could not be avoided. One afternoon, as Aisha was returning from the well with a bucket of water, her mother called her urgently. There was a serious expression on her face, a rare thing, for her mother was usually warm and smiling. "Aisha," she said, taking a deep breath, "sit down. We need to talk." Curious, but sensing the gravity of the moment, Aisha obeyed and sat on the edge of the wooden bench under the neem tree in their yard. Her father joined them, wiping sweat from his forehead. There was a quiet tension in the air that immediately made Aisha uneasy. "Aisha," her father began slowly, "you know our land is not large, and times have been difficult. The crops have not been enough this year, and the debts, well, they have been growing." He paused, his hands trembling slightly. "There is a family nearby, the Qureshis. They have a son, Rafiq." He is a good young man, and they have offered to marry you to him. In return, they want a portion of our land." Aisha's heart skipped a beat. She knew of the Qureshis. They were wealthy and respected in the village. Rafiq was a name she had heard often, associated with power, stability, and serious demeanor. But what mattered to her was not the wealth, the land, or even the respect of their family. What mattered was her own voice, her own choice.
"No," she said firmly, her voice calm but unwavering.
"I will not marry someone just for land. I will not. I will not give up my life like that." Her parents exchanged worried glances, breaths. Her mother's eyes filled with tears. "Aisha, it is not just about you. We are barely surviving. If we agree to this marriage, the family will get the land they want and we will be secure. You will be married into a respected family. Think of our future." Bah. Aisha shook her head, frustration rising in her chest. "I understand the family's struggle. I understand everything. But my life is mine. I cannot marry someone I do not love." I cannot live with the thought that my happiness is being traded like this. Her father's voice grew stern. Aisha, love does not always come first. Sometimes duty is more important than feelings. Do you not care for your family? Aisha felt a pang of guilt. She loved her family dearly, more than anything, but she also knew that sacrificing her heart for the sake of land would leave her empty. She stood up, brushing her hands on her cotton dress. I care for you, Father. I care for all of you. But I cannot give my life to someone I do not know or feel for. I cannot accept a future dictated by others. Her parents were silent, caught between the reality of their financial struggles and the stubbornness of their daughter. Breath. Days passed with tense conversations, tears, and arguments. The villagers noticed the unease in Aisha's household, and whispers began to spread. Some supported her right to choose, others believed she was being reckless and disrespectful. Meanwhile, Rafiq, the man she was expected to marry, was preparing for the alliance. In his own home, he had no say in the arrangement either. The marriage was expected of him, as it was of every son in the community. But he had heard of Aisha, her intelligence, her kindness, her spirit, and though he felt curiosity, he too wondered what it meant to marry someone under such circumstances. Aisha continued with her daily life, tending the small garden, helping her siblings with homework, and walking through the fields where the wheat swayed like a golden ocean. Each day she thought of freedom, the ability to make choices, to pursue dreams, and to live a life of her own design. But the shadow of the impending marriage loomed over her like a dark cloud, and no amount of sunlight could dispel it. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange, Aisha sat alone under the neem tree, reflecting on her life. She wondered if defiance alone would protect her, or if circumstances would force her hand. She knew that love was not something that could be demanded or arranged. It had to grow, naturally, like a seed nurtured with care. The thought that her life might be dictated by others made her chest tighten, but she also knew she was strong. She would fight for her choice, even if it meant standing alone. Her mother came and sat beside her, placing a hand on her shoulder. I understand why you feel this way, she whispered. But sometimes life does not give us the luxury of waiting. We must make difficult choices for survival. I only wish. Her voice faltered, and she looked away, as if afraid to finish the sentence. Aisha leaned against her mother, feeling the weight of both love and sorrow. Breaths. I know, Mother. I understand, but I cannot lie to myself. I cannot say yes when my heart says no. Even if it is hard, I must stand by my feelings. That is the only way I will live honestly. The days grew shorter and the pressure increased. Every family member, every neighbor, and every relative seemed to have an opinion about what Aisha should do. Some offered advice cloaked in wisdom, others in criticism, and a few in harsh judgment. Aisha faced them all with quiet resolve. She listened, considered, but ultimately she refused to surrender her heart. Yet life has a way of testing resolve, and soon Aisha would find that her strength and spirit would be challenged in ways she had never imagined. The offer from the Caresses was not something easily dismissed. Her parents, anxious and tired, began to press her more forcefully. Meetings were held, conversations were arranged with village elders, and the once calm and peaceful home grew tense. Aisha felt the walls closing in, yet she clung to her belief that life should be chosen, not forced. Amid the tension, she found solace in small things. The scent of fresh bread baking in the kitchen, the laughter of her siblings, and the quiet moments in the fields where the wind whispered through the tall grass. These simple joys reminded her that life could still hold beauty, even in the shadow of uncertainty. She wrote in her diary each night, pouring out her thoughts and dreams, imagining a future where she had a voice, where she could love freely, and where her life would be her own. But the villagers' eyes, the family's concerns, and the weight of tradition were not easily ignored. Aisha knew that the coming days would demand courage unlike anything she had faced before. She was determined to stand firm, to fight for her heart, and to prove that even in a world dominated by rules and expectations, a person could choose their own path. And so, as the full moon rose above the fields, casting silver light across the village, Aisha made a silent promise to herself. She would never let anyone decide her heart. No matter the pressure, no matter the consequences, she would remain true to who she was, and she would face whatever came next with strength, dignity, and courage. The storm had not yet arrived, but Aisha could feel its distant rumble. The path ahead was uncertain, the challenges immense, but one thing was clear. She would not surrender her spirit. She would face the future, whatever it held, with unwavering determination. The day of Aisha's wedding arrived like a shadow over the village. The sky was bright and clear, with birds chirping in the early morning sun, yet the atmosphere in Aisha's home was heavy with worry. Her parents were busy with preparations, arranging colorful fabrics, food, and small gifts for the guests. Relatives bustled about, talking excitedly about the ceremony, about Rafiq, and about the land that would soon change hands. But Aisha walked through the house like a quiet storm. Her heart felt heavy, her mind filled with resistance, and her spirit restless. She moved through the motions of the day, helping her mother adjust her dupatta and checking the decorations. But each step reminded her that she had little control over the path that had been set before her. She dressed in a beautiful dress, embroidered with golden threads, and her mother's hands trembled as she adjusted the folds. Aisha looked at herself in the mirror and barely recognized the reflection. There she was, a young woman on the threshold of a life she had not chosen, her face calm, but her eyes full of unspoken protest.
Her mother tried to smile, saying, "You look beautiful, Aisha."
This is a new beginning.
But Aisha could not share the warmth of that sentiment.
It was not a new beginning she had wished for. It was a life imposed by circumstance. When she arrived at the Qureshi household, she was greeted with polite smiles and formal bows. Rafiq stood tall, dressed in a simple yet elegant outfit. He looked at her briefly, and she could see in his eyes a mix of curiosity and detachment. Neither of them spoke at first. The ceremony began with rituals that felt mechanical, almost rehearsed, each step carrying a weight of tradition rather than celebration. Aisha followed along, performing each act with precision, her heart clenched but her movements graceful. The village elders spoke in low, serious tones about the significance of the union, the blessings for the families, and the importance of maintaining respect and tradition. Everyone present celebrated the alliance, seeing it as a perfect match, not realizing that the bride and groom were silent actors in a play written by others. Aisha's mind wandered during the speeches. She thought of her home, her siblings, the fields she loved, and her dreams that now seemed distant. She felt a deep sense of loss. Not for the ceremony, not for the respect of the village, but for the choice that had been denied to her. After the rituals, Aisha was led to the home she would now share with Rafiq. The house was larger than her family's home, built with fine wood and polished floors, but to her it felt cold and unfamiliar. She touched the walls, ran her fingers along the furniture, and felt the weight of silence. Rafiq followed her, speaking only when necessary, his tone polite but distant. They exchanged few words, and the space between them felt wide, not just in the physical sense, but emotionally as well. The first days were difficult. Aisha struggled to find her place in the household. The rooms were unfamiliar, the daily routines confusing, and the expectations heavy. She was expected to be polite, obedient, and agreeable, but her heart resisted every command. She helped with the household chores, spoke respectfully to the elders, and smiled when required, but inside she felt trapped. Every glance, every nod, every small act of courtesy felt like a step away from her true self. Rafik, on the other hand, was quiet and reserved. He had been raised with the understanding that marriage was a duty, not a choice. He respected Aisha, but did not yet know how to reach her. He observed her carefully, noticing the way her eyes avoided his, the way her posture stiffened in their shared spaces, and the subtle tension in her movements. But he understood, in some small way, that she had not come to this life willingly, and that knowledge made him both cautious and uncertain. Days turned into weeks, and Aisha began to feel the walls of the house close in. She missed the open fields of her village, the laughter of her siblings, and the smell of earth after the rain. The village she had grown up in, once a source of warmth and freedom, now seemed far away. She longed for the simple conversations she had with her parents, for the quiet moments under the neem tree, and for the freedom to make choices without fear or obligation. At night, she would sit by the window of her new room, staring at the moonlight reflecting on the fields outside the walls. She would whisper her thoughts into the darkness, telling herself that she was strong, that she would endure, and that someday she might find a way to reconcile her heart with the life that had been forced upon her. Sometimes she imagined walking back to her village, but the thought of abandoning her parents in their time of need held her back. She was torn between duty and desire, between love for her family and the longing for freedom. Rafik tried to reach out in small ways. He would offer help when she was burdened with household tasks, speak kindly when she looked troubled, and occasionally share small smiles. But Aisha remained distant, unsure if she could trust his intentions or if she could allow herself to feel anything for a man she had not chosen. She reminded herself constantly that love could not be forced, and that her heart belonged only to the life she had dreamed of, not the life she had inherited. The in-laws' house was not unkind, but it was demanding. Elders expected Aisha to adjust quickly, to learn traditions she had never practiced, and to accept a life of obedience. She respected them, but she felt the strain of conformity. Every meal prepared, every ritual observed, and every word spoken was a careful balance between showing respect and maintaining her own sense of self.
Exhaustion came not just from physical effort, but from emotional vigilance.
Round and despair. She had to guard her heart while performing the role expected of her. One evening, after a long day of chores and formal visits, Aisha sat in the courtyard, her hands resting on her lap. She watched the stars emerge one by one, thinking about her village, her parents, and the life she had left behind. The air was cool, carrying the scent of blooming flowers from the garden. She wondered if Rafik understood her silence, her quiet resistance, and her longing for freedom. She doubted it, yet she hoped that someday, in some small way, they might understand each other.
Life at the Qureshi house taught her patience and resilience. She learned to navigate unspoken rules, to speak only when necessary, and to act with dignity even when her heart rebelled.
She discovered inner strength she had not realized she possessed, a quiet determination to survive, adapt, and remain true to herself despite circumstances. Every challenge became a lesson, every moment of discomfort a chance to understand herself better. Though she remained distant from Rafik, she observed him closely. She noticed his quiet gestures, the way he ensured the household ran smoothly, how he treated the staff and elders with respect, and how he carried himself with dignity. These small details did not inspire love yet, but they planted seeds of curiosity. She began to see him not as a stranger who had taken away her freedom, but as a man carrying his own burdens, navigating the expectations of tradition, as she was. Weeks turned into months, and slowly, the rhythm of the household became familiar. Aisha found small corners of freedom, early morning walks in the garden, tending to the plants she loved, and moments spent reading quietly in her room. She held on to these fragments of independence, cherishing them as lifelines in a life that often felt imposed. Yet she remained aware that each day brought her closer to a reality she had not chosen, and that her struggle for autonomy was ongoing. One afternoon, an unexpected situation arose. A minor dispute occurred in the village regarding land boundaries, and both families were involved in discussions to resolve it. Aisha and Rafiq were drawn into the conversations, not because they had authority, but because their marriage connected the two families. In these moments, Aisha observed Rafiq handling the matter with calm reasoning and respect for both sides. She saw him as more than the distant figure she had initially perceived. He was thoughtful, capable, and honorable. A man bound by duty, much like herself. Despite the forced circumstances, Aisha began to reconsider her assumptions. She realized that while she had not chosen this path, life was more complex than she had imagined. Rafiq was not the enemy of her freedom. He was a fellow human navigating obligations and expectations. Though she still did not feel love, a sense of respect and understanding began to emerge. Subtle, but undeniable. Nights remained quiet, filled with reflection and small hopes. Aisha would write in her diary, pouring out her fears, frustrations, and occasional glimpses of curiosity about Rafiq. She allowed herself to dream quietly, not of love, but of a life where choices could be made thoughtfully, and hearts could grow naturally. She understood that the journey ahead would be challenging, and that trust and understanding were not given. They were built slowly, day by day, through observation, patience, and shared experiences. By the end of the first few months, Aisha had adapted to her new life without losing herself entirely. She still resisted forced emotions, still held her heart tightly, and still dreamed of autonomy. But she had begun to see that life, even when imposed, offered small opportunities to learn, to grow, and to connect. Rafiq remained distant in some ways, but not unapproachable. He had proven his character through actions rather than words, and in doing so had earned a measure of cautious respect from her. Aisha's journey was far from complete. The marriage remained a transaction on paper, yet beneath the surface, subtle shifts were taking place. Patience, resilience, and careful observation were her tools. She had learned that even in a life forced by circumstance, it was possible to retain dignity, to nurture inner strength, and to lay the groundwork for a future shaped by understanding rather than obligation. The village continued to watch, the elders continued to expect, and the challenges of tradition continued to press upon her. Yet Aisha faced each day with quiet courage, finding moments of peace in the garden, solace in the stars, and strength within herself. The story of her life had entered a new chapter, one filled with challenges, learning, and the faint beginnings of respect between two people brought together not by choice, but by fate. And though love had not yet found its way into her heart, Aisha sensed that life had more in store than she had imagined. The journey ahead would test her, but it would also reveal truths about herself, Rafiq, and the possibility that connection and understanding could grow even in unexpected circumstances.
Months passed since Aisha had stepped into the Qureshi household.
The days had begun to settle into a rhythm, but the emptiness she had felt in her heart still lingered. She carried out her responsibilities with precision, yet she often wondered if life would ever offer her freedom or joy beyond duty. Rafiq remained a quiet presence, a man of few words but of careful observation. He rarely intruded into her thoughts, but sometimes she caught him watching her with a softness she had not expected. He did not push, did not demand, and that alone began to spark a curiosity in her mind. One morning, as Aisha was tending to the small vegetable garden behind the house, she noticed a commotion near the village boundary. A group of workers had accidentally damaged a portion of the land she had once visited as a child. a small plot that her family had maintained carefully. She felt a pang of frustration and went to assess the situation. To her surprise, Rafik was already there, speaking calmly to the workers, instructing them to be careful and to repair the damage. Aisha hesitated, unsure if she should intervene. Yet something about his demeanor, the patience in his voice, the respect in the way he addressed the workers, caught her attention. She stepped closer. "You don't have to do this," she said quietly, not wanting to disturb the delicate situation. Rafik glanced at her and smiled faintly. "It's not just for me. It's for everyone. If we ignore small things, they become big problems." Aisha nodded, impressed despite herself. She had always admired people who acted with thought and care, and here was Rafik, handling a difficult situation without arrogance or force. For the first time, she saw him as more than just a man she had been forced to marry, a man with his own sense of duty and compassion. In the following days, this incident marked a subtle change in their relationship. Aisha found herself noticing his small acts of kindness, how he would make sure the staff were treated fairly, how he helped the elders of the family without expecting praise, and how he listened patiently when someone spoke. These moments did not erase the tension between them, nor did they create love overnight, but they planted seeds of respect and curiosity.
Life, however, did not pause for observation.
One evening, a heavy storm swept across the village. Rain poured in torrents, and the wind howled through the trees. Aisha's thoughts immediately went to the fields and the crops. She worried about the workers and the family's land. Rafik, sensing her concern, spoke quietly. "Let's check the fields, brave. We should make sure everything is safe." Together, they ventured into the storm. The wind battered them and rain soaked their clothes, but they moved with determination. Aisha was surprised by Rafik's strength, not just physical, but his calm, strategic thinking under pressure. He directed the workers, secured the tools, and ensured that no one was in danger. Amid the chaos, Aisha found herself relying on him in a way she had never imagined. She began to feel a quiet trust, knowing that he could be depended upon when things became difficult. That night, as they returned to the house drenched and exhausted, Aisha felt a strange sense of closeness. The silence between them was no longer uncomfortable. They did not need words to acknowledge the shared effort. For the first time, she saw Rafik not as a stranger or as part of a transaction, but as a human being navigating challenges just as she was.
In the weeks that followed, their lives became intertwined in unexpected ways.
A minor land dispute arose with another family in the village, and both Aisha and Rafik were involved in resolving it.
Aisha, who had always been observant and wise, suggested solutions that were fair and reasonable.
Rafik listened, considering her advice carefully before acting. The collaboration required patience, compromise, and clear communication, qualities that both of them had to cultivate. Through these shared struggles, Aisha began to notice subtler things about Rafik. She saw how he handled disappointment with grace, how he admitted mistakes without ego, and how he respected the opinions of others even when they differed from his own. These qualities stirred something in her, a recognition that a man could be both strong and kind, firm yet understanding. She did not call it love, not yet, but it was the first time she felt that the man beside her might be worthy of her trust. One afternoon, while they were overseeing repairs on a section of the land damaged by heavy rainfall, Rafik spoke for the first time in a way that felt personal. "I know this is not how you wanted your life to turn out," he said, voice low and careful. "And I can't undo that. But I want you to know that I respect you. I will never try to force your heart." Aisha paused, her hands frozen mid-task. She looked at him, meeting his eyes for the first time with unguarded honesty. There was no pretense, no arrogance, just a quiet sincerity she had not expected. For the first time, she felt that her feelings, her choices, and her autonomy were being acknowledged. She did not respond immediately, but inside, a small flicker of hope began to grow. Life continued, with its mixture of duty and quiet discovery. Ayesha and Rafiq spent more time together not because of obligation, but because circumstances often required it. During the harvest season, they worked side by side, sharing moments of light conversation between tasks. They laughed quietly over small mistakes, exchanged helpful tips for managing the land, and began to learn each other's rhythms. These shared experiences slowly transformed their perception of one another. Ayesha, who had once seen Rafiq as a stranger and a symbol of lost freedom, now saw him as capable, thoughtful, and reliable. Rafiq, who had viewed Ayesha with curiosity and caution, began to admire her resilience, intelligence, and quiet strength. The foundation of respect and understanding was being laid, and though neither dared to call it love, it was a gentle shift that could not be ignored. Ayesha also began to feel more comfortable asserting herself within the household. She suggested changes to improve efficiency, offered solutions to problems, and spoke her mind when necessary. Rafiq supported her, valuing her opinions and giving her space to contribute. Their interactions became collaborative rather than hierarchical, and Ayesha felt a sense of empowerment she had not known since leaving her own home. One evening, as they walked through the fields after a long day of work, Ayesha reflected on the months that had passed. She thought about the anger and resistance she had felt at the beginning, the loneliness of the early days, and the gradual shift that had begun. She realized that her heart, though not yet in love, was opening in a way she had not anticipated. The fear of being trapped was giving way to cautious hope. Rafiq, walking beside her, noticed her thoughtful silence. "You're quiet tonight," he said softly. Ayesha smiled faintly. "I was just thinking," she replied, "that life can surprise you. Sometimes, even when you don't choose the path, there are lessons to learn and moments of growth you never expected."
Rafiq nodded, understanding her without needing further explanation.
He had learned the same lesson, that even in a life dictated by circumstance, genuine connection could emerge if patience, respect, and understanding were present.
The villagers began to notice the subtle changes, too.
They saw Ayesha moving with confidence in her new home, speaking thoughtfully and participating in decisions.
They saw Rafiq listening to her, considering her ideas, and treating her with respect. Whispers of admiration replaced gossip of pity, and the young couple, once seen as a union of convenience, began to earn quiet acknowledgement for the bond that was forming, small, tentative, but real. Ayesha's parents visited occasionally, relieved to see that their daughter was not only surviving but beginning to thrive. They noticed the growing respect between the two, and while they did not fully understand the complexities of the feelings developing, they felt a sense of relief that Ayesha's spirit had not been broken. Over time, Ayesha realized that life was teaching her a profound lesson. Love was not always immediate, and trust was not always given freely. It had to be built through shared experiences, understanding, and patience. Her heart had been guarded, yes, but it was also learning to recognize sincerity and kindness when it appeared. Rafiq had become more than the man she had been forced to marry. He was slowly becoming a companion, someone whose presence brought stability, support, and even small moments of comfort. One day, a minor accident occurred in the fields when a scarecrow they had built toppled over and frightened the livestock. Both Ayesha and Rafiq rushed to fix the situation, laughing at their shared clumsiness and the chaos that ensued. In that moment, they were simply two people working together without obligation or expectation. The laughter they shared was genuine, unforced, and it lingered in Ayesha's heart. By taking, she realized that the foundation of connection could be built in these simple, ordinary moments, and that perhaps, over time, love could grow from this soil of shared experiences. By the end of the year, the relationship between Aisha and Rafiq had changed in ways neither could have predicted. The forced marriage had not yet become a union of love, but it had become a partnership of respect, understanding, and cautious trust. Aisha had learned to rely on Rafiq when circumstances demanded it, and he had learned to value her intelligence, insight, and resilience. Together, they had navigated challenges, shared responsibilities, and discovered that connection could grow even where it was initially unwanted. And though neither spoke of love aloud, the first seeds had been planted. They were seeds of trust, shared struggle, and subtle admiration. Life was no longer a burden they carried alone. It was a path they walked side by side, discovering along the way that even forced circumstances could bring unexpected companionship and quiet hope. Life in the Qureshi household had grown quieter in the way of familiarity but richer in subtle understanding. The forced union that had once seemed like a heavy burden now carried the faint promise of connection. Aisha had learned to navigate the routines of her new home, while Rafiq had learned to see her not merely as his wife in name, but as a strong, capable partner. The early tension had softened into a gentle rhythm of respect, patience, and small moments of companionship. Yet the question of love still lingered unspoken between them, hovering quietly in the spaces where words had not yet been necessary. It was during the spring harvest that the change began to reveal itself more clearly. The rains had nourished the fields, and the wheat swayed in golden waves under the sunlight. Aisha and Rafiq worked side by side, guiding the workers, arranging the bundles, and ensuring that the harvest was managed efficiently. The days were long and tiring, yet there was a lightness in the shared effort. Laughter came more easily now, emerging from the small mistakes and accidents that naturally occurred when people worked closely together. One afternoon, as they rested under the shade of a large tree, Aisha watched Rafiq quietly surveying the fields. He looked at her and smiled, not with obligation but with a warmth that made her heart flutter, unexpectedly. "You've learned quickly," he said. "Better than I expected." Aisha laughed softly, a sound that had begun to feel natural in his presence. "I've had good teachers," she replied, meeting his gaze. The brief exchange carried no pretense, only mutual acknowledgement of each other's efforts. And in that moment something shifted. The invisible wall of distance that had separated them for months began to crumble, replaced by the quiet understanding that they were partners, not just in duty, but in life's small adventures. As the harvest progressed, their interactions became more natural. Aisha would suggest better ways to organize the fields, and Rafiq would listen and sometimes smile at her cleverness. He began to ask her opinions more often, valuing her thoughts and insight in ways that made her feel seen, respected, and appreciated. She noticed how he quietly supported the household staff, how he deferred to her suggestions at times, and how his calm, patient nature had a soothing effect on everyone around him. Slowly, admiration gave way to trust, and trust laid the foundation for deeper feelings. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky with streaks of orange and pink, Aisha found herself walking through the courtyard with Rafiq. They spoke of ordinary things, the weather, the upcoming planting season, and the laughter of children playing nearby. The simplicity of the conversation, the ease with which they shared thoughts, created a space neither had expected. Aisha realized that she was beginning to enjoy his company, not because she was obligated to, but because she genuinely wanted to. The realization startled her. Could it be that affection was quietly growing where once there had only been resistance? It was during a small village festival that their bond became more visible. The celebration was filled with music, lights, and laughter, as villagers came together to honor the season and the community's traditions. Aisha and Rafiq participated with others, joining in simple dances and games. They laughed, teased each other lightly, and moved in sync during a game that required coordination and trust. Watching Rafiq care for her in the small moments, making sure she didn't slip on the wet ground, encouraging her to try a playful challenge, Aisha felt warmth in her heart. For the first time, she realized that love could be gentle, supportive, and born out of shared experience rather than sudden passion. As the months went on, Aisha noticed herself thinking of Rafik during quiet moments at the house. She remembered his smile when she had made a clever suggestion, his calm voice when she had felt uncertain, and his thoughtfulness toward the villagers. These thoughts no longer brought frustration or resistance, but a quiet sense of contentment. Rafik, too, found himself drawn to her in ways he had not anticipated. He admired her intelligence, her strength, and the way she carried herself with dignity even in difficult circumstances. Breaths. Slowly, their hearts began to recognize each other even without speaking the words aloud. The turning point came during a minor crisis in the village. Heavy rains had caused a small landslide near the edge of the farmland, threatening the crops and the homes of some villagers. Aisha and Rafik, working together, organized a community to protect the fields and assist the affected families. They coordinated efforts, reassured the villagers, and worked tirelessly until the danger had passed. Exhausted but satisfied, they returned home, mud-stained and soaked from the rain. That night, as they dried their clothes by the fire, they shared stories of their childhoods, their hopes, and the dreams they had once held. The conversation was easy and unguarded, a stark contrast to the early days when words had been formal and measured. In sharing their stories, they found empathy and understanding in each other's experiences. Aisha realized that Rafik was not just a man who had taken her hand in a forced marriage. He was someone who could listen, understand, and care deeply. Rafik, in turn, saw that Aisha's spirit, her resilience, and her compassion made her extraordinary, and he felt gratitude for the opportunity to truly know her. From that night onward, their interactions began to carry a subtle intimacy. Small gestures, offering tea, sharing a blanket during cool nights, helping each other with work, became expressions of care. They began to speak more freely, laughing over minor mistakes, sharing opinions, and gently teasing one another. These moments, though small, were significant. Love, they realized, did not always arrive suddenly. It grew in the quiet spaces, nurtured by patience, shared effort, and mutual respect. Aisha's parents visited once more and were relieved to see the transformation. They noticed the way she smiled more often, the ease with which she interacted with Rafik, and the respect they showed each other. It was clear that while the marriage had begun as a transaction, it had blossomed into a partnership built on understanding and care.
Her parents' hearts lightened, knowing that their daughter's spirit remained unbroken and that she had found companionship even in unexpected circumstances. The villagers, too, observed the change. Those who had once whispered about a forced union now saw a couple growing closer through shared experiences. Rafik's respect for Aisha, combined with her intelligence and strength, inspired admiration and quiet acknowledgement. The bond between them became a subtle example of how patience, understanding, and shared responsibility could transform even the most difficult beginnings. One evening, under a full moon, Aisha and Rafik walked along the edge of the fields, the cool night air carrying the scent of damp earth and blooming flowers. They spoke softly, their words carrying warmth and familiarity. Aisha laughed at a playful comment Rafik made, and he, in turn, smiled at her infectious joy. The simplicity of the moment made her heart feel light, and she realized that her feelings had changed. Love had quietly taken root, not explosive, but steady, patient, and enduring. Rafik, noticing her thoughtful expression, took her hand gently. "Aisha," he said softly, "I know we didn't choose this path. But I want you to know that being with you, it has become the most important part of my life. I respect you, I admire you, and I care for you deeply." Aisha looked at him, her eyes reflecting the moonlight. She felt her heart swell with emotions she had once denied. "I never expected this," she admitted. "But I care for you too. Not because I had to, but because I want to. Because I see you,
not just as my husband, but as someone who understands me, respects me, and stands beside me. In that quiet moment, under the silver glow of the moon, the barriers of fear, doubt, and resistance dissolved. They smiled at each other, understanding that love had grown not from obligation but from shared struggle, respect, and genuine care. The marriage that had begun as a transaction had transformed into a bond of hearts, forged patiently through time and experience. The following days were filled with newfound ease and joy. Aisha and Rafiq worked together seamlessly, laughed openly, and found comfort in each other's presence. Their home, once a place of tension, became a space of warmth, collaboration, and subtle affection. Even the elders of the family noticed the change, offering quiet smiles and blessings as they saw the couple grow closer in understanding and love. Aisha reflected on the journey she had undertaken, from resistance and fear to trust and affection. She understood now that life's path was unpredictable, and that love did not always arrive in the form one expected. Sometimes it grew quietly, nurtured by patience, shared struggles, and mutual respect. She felt gratitude for the lessons learned, for the strength she had discovered within herself, and for the unexpected companionship that had entered her life. Rafiq, too, reflected on the transformation. He realized that true partnership required listening, understanding, and patience. He admired Aisha not only for her beauty, but for her intelligence, her courage, and the unwavering spirit she had maintained throughout the journey. Together, they had learned that love was not about grand gestures alone. It was about the small, consistent acts of care, respect, and support that built the foundation for a lasting bond. The village, now aware of their evolving relationship, began to treat the couple with respect and warmth. The story of Aisha and Rafiq became a quiet example of how understanding, patience, and resilience could turn even the most difficult circumstances into a story of hope and love. Families who had once doubted the possibility of happiness in a forced marriage now saw the beauty of a bond nurtured by mutual effort and care. Seasons changed, crops were planted and harvested, and life continued with its challenges and joys. Aisha and Rafiq faced difficulties, as every life does, but they faced them together. They celebrated small victories, comforted each other in times of sorrow, and discovered joy in the everyday moments. Their love, rooted in respect and shared experience, grew steadily and deeply, unshaken by the initial circumstances that had brought them together. And so, the story that began with resistance, fear, and the weight of obligation concluded with understanding, companionship, and love. Aisha had learned that while life could be unpredictable and sometimes unfair, the heart could find its way when nurtured with patience, respect, and shared effort. Rafiq had learned that love required observation, understanding, and gentle care. Together, they had discovered that true partnership was not imposed but earned, and that love, even when unexpected, could flourish beautifully when hearts were open and willing. Under the golden sun of a new day, standing together at the edge of the fields, Aisha and Rafiq looked out over the land that had once been the source of tension. Now, it symbolized growth, patience, and the life they had built together. Their hands intertwined, their hearts aligned. They walked forward side by side, ready to face whatever came next, not as strangers bound by obligation, but as partners connected by respect, understanding, and love.